when we built our house, I was walking through with a trimeter, right? Just measuring, all the different EMFs coming out, right? And I'm like, hey, y'all got to reroute this electrical line here. Like, this ain't flying, because it is important. It truly is, and I don't want my kids to be sleeping and their brains being microwaved. That's not good for them, and it's not good for society, because that does not breed a healthy brain. And if we're not, doing what we can to develop a healthy brain, we're going to see a rise in neurodegenerative disease. We're going to see a rise in mental health disorders, and that's what we're seeing. So it's paramount for our society.
Welcome to the Brain Regen Lab podcast, where ancient healing meets modern science to transform the future of brain health. I'm Dr. Greg Eckel, and after 25 years in the trenches of integrative medicine, I'm here to challenge the status quo. On this show, we dive deep into the most advanced strategies in brain regeneration, cognitive longevity, and bioenergetics with some of the brightest minds in neuroscience, medicine, and performance. Whether you're fighting cognitive decline, optimizing your mental edge, or just curious about what's possible for the human brain and being, this podcast is your lab for discovery, healing, and human potential. So let's push the boundaries of what's possible, revitalize your mind, transform your life. Let's begin. Today, we're diving deep into the cutting-edge therapies for neurodegeneration with Dr. Brandon Crawford, a true pioneer in functional neurology and photobiomodulation. This episode is not just about science. It's about hope, innovation, and the real possibility of reversing what we once thought was irreversible. You'll hear about the groundbreaking work that's happening right now in neuroregeneration and why what we're doing today might just be the key to unlocking a future where neurological conditions like autism, Parkinson's, and even rare genetic disorders can be overcome. This isn't just another podcast, it's a movement. And you're about to hear why. Stay tuned, because the next 35 minutes could be the most transformative of your life. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Dr. Greg Eckel here. Our topic today is cutting-edge therapies for neurodegenerative diseases. What's on the horizon? I have Dr. Brandon Crawford, who is a renowned expert in functional neurology and photobiomodulation with a focus on childhood neurodevelopment. He holds degrees from Texas A&M University and Parker University, including a doctorate in chiropractic. As a licensed chiropractor in both Texas and Dubai, and a fellow of the International Board of Functional Neurology, Dr. Crawford leads in his field, operating the NeuroSolution Center of Austin and co-founding the NeuroSolution Center of Atlanta and related ventures. A global lecturer, he's known for his work in laser and light therapy within functional neurology and is authoring a book on neuroplasticity for brain injuries. Dr. Crawford champions the NeuroSolution ESM methods, focusing on energy, sensory, and movement, and is a sought-after speaker on diverse health topics. Welcome aboard, Dr. Crawford.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that bio that someone else wrote. It sounds great.
It's amazing. And I would say, we know you are a smart fellow. I'm really excited for this because it is what's on the horizon. We've been lecturing on the future of medicine as frequency, and that future is now. And you are up to some amazing things. Will you talk a bit of your work in your centers and what you're seeing? Because for neuroregeneration, you really are on the forefront.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I think the same about you, right? And we were just talking about how rare it is to have both someone that's doing clinical work and then also research. And I definitely understand that. But to be able to do what you've done and accomplish the things is just amazing. So thank you for that. And thank you for the contributions that you bring to the world. It's interesting because I live in this fun world where I get to bring the best of functional neurology with innovation in photobiomodulation. And really, what I've come to find out is that if we want to get the best outcome of the cell or the neuron, right, we have to make sure that certain things are in place to allow it to thrive. And that idea about thriving is different than surviving, right? And I think that your listeners understand that. I don't want them to survive, I want them to thrive. Traditional medicine, I don't think really operates like that. But really, if we understand the basic needs of the cell and we supply that, we see some amazing things happen. And in traditional medicine, they don't really understand it. And sometimes they call these things miracles, right? And that's okay. But miracles then are our anticipated outcome or our expected outcome, right? And one of the things that we have found to be true at every level is that if we supply the right light environment to these neurons, to these cells, coupled with the proper type of stimulation that the cell needs, we are seeing that cell exceed thresholds, go beyond, what was expected. And I'm talking about even in genetic disorders, which we've seen now a good number of syndromic cases, whether it be rare pediatric brain disorders to, I even consulted with a very rare disorder yesterday. I think there was only like 175 reported in the world. What I'm finding clinically, time after time, is that there is so much potential for these individuals that's being left on the table simply because their provider is saying, hey, you have this genetic disorder, see you later. And they're not offering any kind of help, right? And last time we talked, we spoke a lot about photons, electrons, and frequencies. That was the general theme. And whenever you get that combination right, coupled with the right combination of physical stimulus for these systems, we are seeing neuroplasticity really, really come to life and take the form of recoveries that were never thought possible. And it's really amazing. So I don't know where we want to take it from there, but that's kind of the long and the short of it.
Well, I love it. And so let's start at the foundational component, because this isn't just, you said a lot right there. And so it isn't just about the light. It's not about frequency. It's not about photon. You spoke to the foundational component of the terrain, right? I like that component. Let's talk about, these rare genetic aspects, because I think with us showing results, we had a case of Charcot-Marie tooth disorder, genetic disorder, actually neuroplastic return to normal functioning. That's not supposed to happen in the Western mind once you have a genetic disorder. So I think if we talk about it in some of the miraculous cures that we are now expecting as a common stance in our centers, people will have the possibility to actually venture out into that realm of possibilities. Because when you have authorities almost casting a spell on people around, there's nothing we can do for you, that is an opinion, and it's ill-informed, especially in light, and pun intended, with the results that we're getting in our centers. So talk about how you work with the terrain, how you think about it, maybe your that component of, when Dr. Crawford sets the stage for people's healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do believe that light is very foundational. Yes, it goes well beyond light, and we can talk about nutrition, we can talk about detox, we can talk about all of those different things, and they're extremely important. In my mind, right, God created light before he created life. And because of that, it is foundational. And if we skip over it and we don't pay attention to certain aspects about that, then we're missing a big picture. And just side note, yes, I'm faith-based, but for those that are not faith-based, if we talk about the Big Bang, et cetera, then light still preceded life. So, no matter how this shakes out, light is a foundational component to life, and it has been acknowledged for hundreds of years. Even Albert Einstein was, coming up with these discoveries and others. So one thing we need to be very aware of is that our current light environment is in place not to improve our health. And I said that very carefully because I believe it's set in place to actually cause deleterious health consequences. One of my theories that I think actually I've connected several dots on is that when a pregnant mother, right, when we have this baby in utero, we know that certain wavelengths of light influence the migration of certain cell types, right? And so we have these neural crest cells, we have stem cells, we have all of these really cool cells doing this really cool symphony and just working together and growing this baby and creating this life. Light can have an impact in utero. And so what we know is that high frequency white and blue light can actually alter the migration of those neural crest cells, giving way to neurological imbalances. And I do believe that it's correlative that as we increase our exposure to this high frequency white and blue light, we are seeing an explosion of neurobehavioral disorders, neurodegenerative disorders, other types of chronic disease, et cetera. So I think it's hard to ignore that. And so as far to change all the light in my office, right, you cannot exceed 3000 Kelvin on any light in the ceiling in my office. It's very specific. We have dimmers in every room. We have windows in all the rooms that we can possibly get windows in. So if we're going to create a healing environment, that's very important to us. So when we're talking to patients, we're asking questions like, how much screen time do you get? How much outside time do you get? How much time are you under fluorescent lighting? All of these things, right? And it may seem like simple questions. It may seem like, man, what am I paying this guy for? But when we can like outline, hey, 90% of your day is in the wrong type of light, that's really bad. And here are the research studies as to why that's bad. And here are the studies that show you if you correct that light environment, it can actually push you into optimal health, right? So that is foundational. And really that sets the stage for the discussion of circadian biology. So if we can, improve someone's circadian biology, and I don't like using the term circadian rhythm because then people just think about sleep, but our circadian biology is a symphony of things that happens, and it's based on light timing and food timing. And there's other components that it's based on, but those are the two main ones. And we can begin to counsel someone on these minor, well, what may seem like minor tweaks, but have a huge payoff, right? That sets the stage for someone to be able to actually thrive and optimize their neurophysiology. Now, it goes beyond that, like I mentioned, outdoor time. This is something that is waning in our society, right? Everyone is just scared of the sun. They want to slather sunscreen all over themselves if they are exposed to the sun. But the sun is providing the most essential form of light, and we cannot get away from that. I've developed lasers. I think I've developed the best laser on the market, but it doesn't exceed what the sun can provide, right? I mean, I can't tell someone just use these lasers and you don't need any of that sun exposure. Not true, never going to be true. So simple things like that can make a huge difference.
Boy, that's massive. And I like that you said circadian, not rhythm, circadian biology.
Yes.
Yes, I love that concept. And it is the cascade of all of the hormones and neurotransmitters being released through the system. It makes sense to take that broader look at it versus just, well, here's the regiment of going to bed at this time, waking up here, getting your circadian clock set. It is that biology, you're talking to the naturopathic doc, so getting outside is near and dear to my heart. And the way I talk about it with patients is we're eating sun energy across the board. All of the vegetables, meats, fish, etc., is there because of the sun. And so when you were talking about that, it gave me some good shivers and chills. And in that, we're in the vein of what folks are needing to hear of, it is getting, it's like when we grew up of like, just go outside and play, kids. I think, that is much less common these days of getting more attached into our electrical current of the day.
Right.
So what do you recommend for sun exposure, getting out into nature? I mean, what are some general recommendations there?
Absolutely. So, and just to kind of put this into like a clinical picture perspective, right? So if we're talking about, someone with a neurodegenerative disease, let's talk about Parkinson's, right? So this is in the traditional medical model, all about dopamine, right? Well, our dopamine production is dependent upon aromatic amino acids that then are put together and eventually end up in the form of a neurotransmitter like dopamine. But it takes a certain wavelength of light to be absorbed into those aromatic benzene rings to actually be active and to then turn into a neurotransmitter. So someone that has something like Parkinson's or something like this, and they're deficient in a neurotransmitter, the early morning sunlight is essential. You have to be outside and capture that early sunlight. And when I say early, I know that's different for everyone. So I just put out I'm in Central Texas. So the statement of, get outside before 10 a.m. is, maybe that doesn't apply for someone in a, big northern region where, the sun doesn't rise until a certain time. But, I tell people in this area, get outside before 10 a.m., ideally earlier, but how that goes sometimes, to capture that low angle wavelength of light coming in. That's a different wavelength, a different frequency of light than you capture at noon. That's a different wavelength, different frequency of light that you capture in the evening. And this is just the beauty of how this whole thing we call Earth was created, in that the sun is providing different forms of light energy all throughout the day. And it's talking to our neurotransmitters, it's talking to our microbiome, it's talking to our body everywhere so that we can have an optimized life. And if we're missing it, then we're missing it, right? We're not going to get it anywhere else. So I tell people it is essential to be outside sometime in that morning time to capture the low angle sunlight. That's essential neurochemistry across the board. You have to have that for proper neurochemistry. So anyone with anxiety, depression, and neurodegenerative disease, if we're trying to create neuroplasticity for anything, we need that to happen. Also, what I want is midday when that sun is at its peak, I also want you outside. Now, I want your belly exposed here, right? This is important because these longer wavelengths of light are penetrating deeper into the body, and we know that they have a positive impact on the microbiome. There's multiple studies that I can present that show you light impacts our microbiome. If we want our microbiome to thrive, we need optimal light on our gut. And noon, or when the sun is at its peak, is a great time to go outside. Even if it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, okay, that's fine. Go outside, get some sun on your belly. Very important there. And then I also want people outside as the sun is setting. And again, it can be 10 or 20 minutes, but we need that type of wavelength and frequency of light to then begin to signal to our brain and our body that, hey, it's getting close to bedtime. Let's ramp up our serotonin and let's start to calm down so that we can sleep. Now, here's what's vitally important, because I've had patients that do this. And they're like, hey, doc, I'm doing great. I'm outside when the sun's rising. I go outside, for lunch, and I'm outside in the evening. I still can't sleep. And I'm like, really? What do you do when you go in after the sun sets? Are you in front of a TV, a phone? Oh, yeah, I go in, I watch my shows, and I work on the computer. And I'm like, okay, hey, you're trying, you're doing a great job. But that frequency of light coming off of the screens is disruptive to our circadian biology. In fact, the intensity of light when the sun goes down needs to remain below 30 lux. LUX, 30 lux. That's a measurement of light intensity. So for us in my house, we have dimmers in every room. When the sun goes down, I have an app on my phone. It's called Light Meter. And I will literally go through the house measuring, making sure that the light intensity in my home is below 30 lux. If we're on a screen, if I'm working on the computer, if my kids want to watch something, we do wear blue light blocking glasses at that point in time, right? I know that we live in 2025, and I know that, these things are going to happen, especially for my kids. I like to get books on the Kindle so that I can take them anywhere. So, sometimes I'm reading on an electronic device. I like to read research before I fall asleep. So all of these things, I have blue light blocking glasses, that I'm wearing if I'm on a screen after the sun goes down. But that's another thing that we need to understand, is that, yes, we need to be outside capturing that light. Again, 10, 20 minutes. Now, if you have a more severe condition that you're working through, those times need to be altered, right? Especially the early morning time. Maybe you need 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. those things, can make a difference. So light environment, sun exposure, but then also paying attention to, not overstimulating your nervous system when the sun is down, because we're just not designed for that.
Yeah, it's so insidious, and we kind of just got baked in that sauce very slowly and insidiously that we don't even notice. Like, you started out saying, while somebody's paying me to do this inventory of how much blue and white light they're getting exposed to. But it is that component of first remove the cause of illness. And that one never gets looked at in conventional medicine. And I love that as a foundational component. And then you can maybe supercharge with some targeted interventions on top of that. I
Yes.
love that as the foundation. So let's talk about some of the kind of breakthroughs that you're seeing in your center and with neuroplasticity, neuroregeneration. I know you do a lot of work with folks with autism or on the autistic spectrum disorder array. You're having some phenomenal results. Hey, it's Dr. Eckel here, just taking a quick moment to say thanks for tuning in to the Brain Regen Lab podcast. If you're enjoying this conversation and want to stay ahead of the latest in brain health, biohacking, and longevity, make sure to subscribe at brainregen.com/podcast. Not only will you never miss an episode, but you'll also get exclusive insights and tools to help you optimize your mind and body. I appreciate you being on this journey with me. Now, let's dive back in and keep unlocking the full potential of your brain and body.
Yes, we are. So when it comes to autism, about 40% of autistic individuals are nonverbal. And so this is a huge thing that people come to us as, hey, we want to hear their voice. We want to have, some type of communication. And now, we're even working a lot with, teenagers, young adults that are on the spectrum, even, nonverbal, and severity is just all over the place, right? And so we have developed a methodology. We call it the NeuroSolution ESM methodology, and that's energy, sensory, movement. And what we know is that the brain has a specific blueprint for how it develops. And so we've mapped out through the developmental exam process certain things that we need to check for. We all know about milestones, right? So we know if a baby is not walking at a certain time or talking at a certain time, this can point to developmental delays and so on. But what we need to understand is that those milestones are correlative with network maturation in the brain, right? So that's just a big picture of like, hey, there's a definitive objective measurement and time frame for when we need to see a certain function that then correlates with network dysfunction. And so taking that idea and applying it to the developmental exam that we've created was the general outline and the general concept. And so what we're looking at is our sensory systems. And so we have a way to evaluate our sensory systems, because obviously if you're numb to the world and you're not really feeling anything, we need to address that first. And then we look at our primitive reflex systems. From our primitive reflexes, we then turn on our postural reflexes, and that then develops our reticular activating system. That system helps us navigate the world both physically and mentally. So if someone is having a filtering problem, they get overstimulated or something like this, oftentimes it's a RAS or a reticular activating system issue. And sometimes it just hasn't been turned on yet because the primitive reflexes have not been integrated. From there, we look at core stability. And we separate core stability into concentric tone, isometric tone, and eccentric tone. From there, we look at vestibular balance, because really at every aspect, we're looking at vestibular because it's that important. And then we're looking at eye movements and then cognition. And making note that cognition is at the end because it requires the foundation of all of those other things to then build the brain that can have the cognitive ability to learn and to speak and to do all of those things. And so that's the direction that we take it. And so the most important part is doing that initial exam and evaluation and identifying where someone is along this process. That gives us a roadmap. That tells us we need to integrate these reflexes, turn on these postural reactions, build this core stability, etc. And then it really just becomes a fun puzzle that you get to start working on, right? And it changes along the way as you build neuroplasticity through these different networks. And then, boom, all of a sudden, someone has social engagement. Someone's able to speak. They stop stimming. Right? All these types of things. What we're doing now, because we've had so many autistic kids speak, so many brain injuries that start to move, that start to speak, so many things that happen that shouldn't be happening. My medical director, who is an integrative neurosurgeon, she's been with us for, I guess, a couple of years now. She keeps on seeing these cases. She goes, Brandon, we have to track this. And so now we've implemented data collection so that we can start to publish, so that we can have the comparative analysis, we can have the data. So that's what we're doing now because, look, I can tell you about this all day, but if you're not in my clinic observing it, it didn't really happen for you, right? Now, obviously, we have patient stories and all those things, which, we can't capture every patient story. I mean, every day we
Yeah.
can put something out there, but now we're actually capturing the data so that we can publish. So, but yeah, it's just this interesting combination of understanding how the brain was designed to develop and then identifying the weaknesses or imbalances and just stimulating those networks, allowing them to develop, and then you see changes in function. That's the general concept. And it truly is amazing. And, there's absolutely nothing else that I would want to be doing with my life. This is truly what I feel like I was called to do. But yeah, we get to see all kinds of miraculous recoveries, right? It's amazing.
I love it. That framework you're using for all neurodegenerative states.
Yes, so let me kind of go into that. So, just like I described how the brain develops, so now imagine, okay, the brain has this blueprint for development. So, we've developed, and then all of a sudden, something happens. That something can be blunt force trauma, someone gets a head injury. Okay, in that scenario, it's not like the brain just says, oh, shoot, I'm injured, I'm done. No, it goes, hey, how did I learn to walk in the beginning? How did I learn to talk? How did I learn to do all these things? And it goes back in time and it starts using these same blueprints to redevelop itself. Now it looks different because there's compensation patterns, etc., but that's how the brain works. Now, from a degenerative standpoint, same thing. You're going along, you have this development in brain, and then something happens. That something can be a toxic exposure, that something can be, maybe a epigenetic trigger or whatever it may be, right? And then you start to get this degeneration of these brain networks. Same rule applies, right? We will see primitive reflexes come back in adults with neurodegenerative disorders all the time. In fact, it's called frontal release signs in an adult, right? That's what they call them in an adult. It's the same thing. So, anyone that is in front of me with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, like all of these things, I'll still do a primitive reflex exam on them and there will be positive findings, which there shouldn't be, right? There should not be any primitive reflexes present in someone over about 1 year old, right? 1 to 2 years old is when we should see those all integrate. And so it's the same roadmap, right? It's okay, well, here's what we can do to help you leverage those blueprints in your brain. And then the limiting factors at that point in time are going to be, well, what were the triggers for that neurodegenerative situation? Do we need to look at detox? Is it epigenetic, genetic related? Is it methylation defects? Is it, all the things that, to check for, right? We don't ignore those. Those are still very important. So we're still wanting to address those in any way that we can. But this concept of the neurodevelopmental blueprint applies, yes, even in neurodegenerative disease.
I love it. It makes sense, right? The brain is the brain and the development is the development. And the constellation or collection of symptoms that people get are unique to that diagnosis or that collection of symptoms, but it's the same anatomy, physiology, bioenergetics surrounding the body. And so that more holistic approach that you're bringing with the functional neurology, chiropractic, mind and background soul of yours is really exciting to me with the naturopathic Chinese medicine component of we're viewing healing response and what is happening with the individual kind of from a similar lens where it's not a reductionist Western approach of looking at the set of the brain is not attached to the body or
Right.
there's no influence from anything else to the nervous system. So healing from inside out, outside in it makes the most sense to me and how I think we're able to affect faster, quicker change for individuals because we're addressing kind of the totality of the system rather than the pieces and parts.
Yes. And I don't know why this came to mind, but you're right. Oftentimes, these methods, right? These, whatever you want to call them, holistic, integrative, whatever term you want to put on,
Yeah.
they are faster sometimes. Isn't that crazy? Right? I mean, it's quite amazing. I was listening to an old lecture by, I can't remember his name. He was the developer of NLP. There
Mm,
were two developers of NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And I was listening to one of them talk, and he was talking about someone with PTSD. And he was like, yeah, this person, they fell in a body of water, and within 30 seconds, they developed this fear. And he was like, so why doesn't it make sense that within 30 seconds, they can undevelop that sense of fear, right? He's
yeah.
like, these types of things are possible when you understand how the brain, the body, and the mind are so interconnected. Yeah, I don't know why that came to mind, but it resonated.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. We got to go with those. So, on what are you seeing? Because you have invented like one of the premier laser applications on a planet. Will you talk about that and what you're seeing with? I mean, it's multiple frequencies, so it's not just red light. Is that right?
Right, correct. Yeah. Let's start here. So, when it comes to light and laser specifically, we need to understand that a laser beam or a light projection, whatever you want to call it, it's like a voice. Okay. So, I can say the same words to you, but I can change the intonation, I can change the way I say it and evoke a different type of neurophysiological experience for the individual. Even though I'm saying the same words, right? I can make you feel differently in the delivery of those words. Okay. So, understanding that concept, I went into this model of, hey, there's some good research out there that shows by just changing a pulsing frequency or a duty cycle or something like that, we actually got different outcomes, even though the power didn't change, the wavelength didn't change. Just starting to change those parameters of the light, we can have a different outcome with the individual. That was fascinating to me, right? And so then I started digging a little deeper and going, wow, this type of, for lack of better words, manipulation of the light is not being done. It's not being done in the laser industry. It's almost like, the laser industry kind of got to a certain place and they were just kind of happy with status quo. And so I looked and I looked and I said, okay, we're just going to have to create it. And so we've created a system where I've been able to create certain algorithms within the duty cycles, the frequencies, the wavelengths, the power, all of these things are in constant flux as that laser is being produced. And all these different settings are producing a different combination. And it's all based on what outcome do I want from using this laser setting. For example, I did a procedure last week and we still use the same laser to laser the V cells, right? Which you're familiar with this procedure. But then when we re-administered, I actually used a green wavelength because green actually helps migrate and home stem cells better than red. And I used certain frequencies that are specific from my best knowledge and research that talk to stem cells more so than other cells. And so I did this procedure last week, and honestly, it's blown my mind. We did it with a patient with bulbar ALS. Immediately, he started sleeping 12 hours a night. His healing systems just kicked on. We know this because all of a sudden he was tired. He just felt like his anxiety just kind of melted away. He would usually sleep like 2 or 3 hours a night. And no matter what we did, like nothing was changing that. So that quick, immediate change was mind blowing. And then we did this again with someone with a severe brain injury. He started trying to speak the next day, and now he has spoken a few words. So just that minor tweak, which is not minor, but just that change in wavelength, in frequencies and duty cycles, I just changed the way that we were talking to those cells and we got a dramatic outcome change, right? It was really amazing. So those are the things that I'm looking at. And I have a lab right now where we're actually designing a research study so that we can fine tune this even more because I want to know, hey, if I want to influence stem cells, what is the specific laser settings that I need to be using? If I want to speak to growth factors, if I want to speak to, whatever it may be, right? So those are the things that I want to start looking at because it's like a voice, right? Just like
Oh, yeah.
if you want to talk to your child, you're going to speak differently than if you go talk to, you know, an adult that, pissed you off that day. So, it's all very, in my mind, it's very delicate, right?
For sure. I mean, you look at the different frequencies with protein expressions as well. There is research coming out on, we're looking at sound frequency for protein expression. That would be late expression for potentially, turning on certain protein expressions that like SERPINA5 that they're finding in meditation, or that is super, super exciting to me.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, I need to get your lasers in immediately.
You will.
Dr. Crawford.
Well, okay, so
Yeah.
talking about proteins, right?
Yeah.
Proteins can only work if they're hydrated. They only work if they're hydrated. Guess what non-native EMF does? It dries up our exclusion zone water in the cell. So just like if you were to put a steak in a microwave, it gets dry. This is what's happening to our body as we're exposed to all of this non-native EMF in our environment. And that's only increasing, right? We
Yeah.
don't see the non-native EMF going down. It's only going up. So we have to combat that with certain wavelengths of light that can actually help our cells start to produce that exclusion zone water again so our proteins work. That's why I chose the 975 nanometer wavelength as one of the main wavelengths that I launched with, because you need to be above 900 nanometers in order to really have a greater influence on exclusion zone water in the cell. But I wanted it to be sub 1000 because I wanted to use it for longer durations on the brain, so I don't want to cause too much heating. So things like that are what we're thinking about.
Wow. I'm glad you came back to that because, when we started talking about, in utero development and in the belly, and I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on EMF. And, as we're designing kind of a remodel on our house and looking at, okay, we need to make the bedroom as like that sanctity space of like no EMFs. We're going to be in there, 8 to 10 hours a day, like have not a Faraday cage per se, but a protected area where our cells and our bodies are able to regenerate without that outside influence. It is like the $1 trillion question for me with looking at Parkinson's of why do proteins misfold, and in particular prionic activity for this. And I think a lot of the work and research that you're showing is on reconstituting proteins and having cells come back to their original moiety or shape. That's where we're going at creating these fields for people to heal, because we're getting bombarded with the blue and the white light. And then there's the non-native EMF, and we're not grounded. We're not in the sun with that energy. I mean, you can see how we've drifted from source almost, where the kind of expression of the innate intelligence is saying, hey, you are off trail, like get back over here. So this is a like super exciting conversation today.
Yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you. When we built our house, I was walking through with a trimeter, right? Just measuring, all the different EMFs coming out, right? And I'm like, hey, y'all got to reroute this electrical line here. Like this ain't flying. I
Yeah.
mean, because it is important. It truly is, and I don't want my kids to be sleeping and their brains being microwaved. That's not good for them, and it's not good for society because that does not breed a healthy brain. And if we're not, doing what we can to develop a healthy brain, we're going to see a rise in neurodegenerative disease. We're going to see a rise in mental health disorders, and that's what we're seeing. So it's paramount for our society.
Ah, so true. Well, let's bring this one into the station a bit, Dr. Crawford. Any last parting words or information that you would like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Sure. I like your statement about getting back to source, right? We have to understand that we were designed to live in a certain environment. And if we're straying away from that, we are not going to have optimal health. And that can take the form of so many different things. It can look like autism, it can look like degenerative disease, it can look like whatever, right? I always tell people, like, what is your weakest link? That's the direction that your non-optimal health is going to go. So that's why it looks different for everyone. But it's really just getting back to the basics. What was my body designed to do and what was my body designed to be in. When my body was designed to be outside, I was designed to eat real food. I was designed to eat food that was collected and harvested around me. I was not designed to eat food that was flown in from across the world. And that's a whole nother topic, right? But that matters. I was designed to move. I was designed to have relationships, etc. Right? So if we understand the basic needs of life and what we were designed for, oftentimes that alone can set you in motion, to really start to change your life. And then, if you are in the scenario where, hey, I have this disease or this condition or genetic disorder or something like that, just know that, man, there's physicians out there like you, like myself, that we're leveraging technology in a good way, right? We're using the right wavelengths of light to revive cells or to change how they're functioning, et cetera. We're using, certain types of biologics or whatever we're doing, right? To harness this source energy and to give you the best ability to be your most optimal self, right? So I don't know if that helps anyone out there, but just know that there are good people doing good things out there, really trying to help you thrive in this world.
So well put. Thank you, Dr. Crawford. You all, if you got something out of the show today, go out there, give us a 5-star review. Put down a little tidbit for somebody to lead them in here. This is where the fun is happening. This is where the change is coming. We're bringing it right to you through the interwebs. Thank you for tuning in. We wouldn't be doing it without you.
If you're finding this conversation insightful, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's a simple way to stay connected and get more strategies for optimizing brain function and longevity. Plus, it helps us bring you even more cutting-edge content. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get back to exploring the future of brain health. Thanks for joining us this week on the Brain Regen Lab podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to visit brainregen.com, where you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave a review. It helps others discover the show. You can also share this episode with a friend or loved one who's passionate about brain health. Want to dive deeper? Check out our latest resources at brainregen.com/podcast. Be sure to tune in next week as we continue unlocking the secrets to a sharper mind and a longer, healthier life. Stay sharp, stay curious, and keep thriving.